This vehicle is quite possibly one of the best tank lines that any player can actually get in the game, and it's super easy to actually play as well. So if you're watching this and you're wondering what tank line to get next, or maybe you're wondering about some tips for the Super Conqueror line, today we're featuring the Conqueror, somewhat easier to actually pick up since you don't need as much XP, and this is the British heavy tanks, or at least one of the 3 British heavy tanks. The second one that you actually pick up in the tech tree line, coming off of the Conqueror leads to the Super Conqueror. But of course you're going to have to play the Conqueror the most in that entire grind, because you got to grind through all 3 tier 10s. So the Conqueror itself, what makes it so special, and why would you actually want to grind through any of the British heavy tanks, albeit some of the lower tier ones not being as good, but they're going to teach you a lot about how to play the game, as well as how to use armor and be able to do a ton of damage at the same time, with some amazing accuracy stats that most heavy tanks simply do not get. Things like the IS-7 lines, they do not get the accuracy that you will see with the Super Conqueror, which is where I think these tanks are brilliant to actually learn the game, and of course learn aiming mechanics and not feel punished too much when you do decide to play them as a beginner, or even a more experienced player where you know how to play and simply these tanks are overpowered. So the Conqueror itself, what makes this one in particular very special, and how does it transfer to the rest of the tech tree line? Well, the Conqueror and the Super Conqueror are pretty much the same variant of the same tank, albeit this Conqueror slightly worse in terms of its armor model and slightly worse statistics on its gun, that sort of stuff. But there are only very minor changes between the tier 9 and tier 10, and essentially just make the tank a little bit better in most ways. Hence the Super Conqueror. It's just a buff version of the Conqueror with a lot better stats in some areas than the tier 9. But the tier 9, tier for tier, potentially is better than the Super Conqueror, potentially, albeit the armor model definitely isn't as strong, which can mean in those tier 10 games you can get stumped pretty hard. But in terms of what these tanks kind of have throughout the entire tech tree line, whether you're starting at the tier 6 or you're starting, you know, higher up in the tech tree at the Carnarvon, for example, they all have insanely strong turrets, which is the whole point of the British heavies. They have really nice strong turrets that have very few weak points, and even the weak points on the turret aren't really too weak in the first place, whereby the cupola on this tank is quite small and the upper part of the cupola is very well angled, so that you basically can't really pen it if you hit it anyway. So with that being said, there is a weak point, which is the flat part of that cupola, the kind of base area of the cupola, which can be penned. So if you're wondering how to pen this thing, you see it hold down where you can't see the actual bottom half of the vehicle, only the turret. That is where you want to be aiming. Albeit there is also another weak point of the Conqueror, which, surprise is not your common weak point that you'll see with a vehicle. It is the mantler of the vehicle right here, 177mm thick, but it is angled, which means it's not going to take 177mm. It's probably going to take in the region about 240, something like that, maybe even higher, because it is quite well angled and you'll often bounce off of it. But the mantler of the Conqueror, it is a weak point. Load your premium rounds in tier 9s and above and you should be able to pen it. Just be aware that if it does angle to the other side and you try and hit the furthest side away, you can bounce. And similarly, if you're on this side and you go for the right hand side as it's shown right now, it will bounce as well. So if you see it front on, you can go for either side. If it angles like this, go for the left hand side as we're looking at it right now. Or if it is like this, you want to go for the right hand side of that mantler if you can't see the cupola of the vehicle. So that's a weak point of this tank, and it also has a turret ring that you can see here in the red at the bottom, not on the actual top of the turret. You can see, and then similarly underneath the mantler, you can see that there is another little area of the ring that you can pen, and there you go, there's another area as well if you can manage to hit it, which requires you to kind of be looking at it directly flat. So if the Conqueror's like this, you can pen it. Similarly, this area, you want to be looking at it like this, and then if you see it like this, you want to be this sort of area or directly in front of it. That sort of angle is going to allow you to have the best chance of penning, and you can pen the Conqueror's turret and cupola of course, if you use those sorts of tips. So in terms of dealing with these tanks, those are your ways. It also transfers to the Super Conqueror with some changes whereby the turret is just slightly stronger than the standard Conqueror, but not by a huge margin. You definitely don't want to be aiming for the side of the turret where you can see these spaced armor plates. They are spaced armor and so will block a ton of rounds. If you see the Conqueror aiming like, kind of like this, you want to be going for the back of the turret. Of course, it doesn't have spaced armor on the back of the turret, so if you see it like this, you can pen reliably the back of the turret. Or if you can see the hull armor, just go straight through the hull armor. It's going to be super simple to actually pen. It does have a kind of hull armor weak point, which is the lower plate, which can be penned. And if you're looking down onto the upper plate of the Conqueror, you can pen it quite easily, as it isn't the thickest either. So if you're face hugging this thing, you could potentially be able to shoot down into it with anywhere from about 200 millimeters of penetration to quite easily pen the upper plate of the Conqueror. And if you're in a super kind of high caliber, high penetration tank, such as a tank destroyer with like 300 pen, you may even be able to pen it straight through the upper plate with your premium round. So just be aware of that, that you can potentially pen just the upper plate with super high penetration, if you're wondering. So the Conqueror armor model works really well, but of course, does it get gun depression? And yes, that is the case with all of these British heavies. Basically 10 degrees making these tanks amazing for on the ridge lines and super useful. If there's a hill, if there's a little bump in the road where you can manage to hide the bottom half of your tank, brilliant, because the Conqueror is going to dominate in that sort of position. You want to be taking it into those positions and it's going to give you the best result possible, and it's going to make it a hell of a lot harder for people to pen you. This is simply not just a case of having high penetration will pen you, it's a case of using the tank in the right way is basically unpennable in some situations. So just be aware of that. Conqueror very strong when it does get hulled down and uses its gun depression. You basically have to go for the mantlet because the cupola gets hidden by the tank. So that's kind of how you can use the Conqueror and also how you can take it out. So hopefully at least you've seen a couple of things within this video, even if you're not looking to pick up this tank. But what kind of punch does the Conqueror actually have in the game? Well, the Conqueror has a 400 alpha damage gun, which is amazing for the tier, but what about the DPM? Well, you'll be pleasantly surprised to see that it has 3,000 damage per minute with this vehicle in the way that we've got it set up. And talking about setup, we've got advanced loader, we have got ventilation, and we've got advanced optics. Now you could swap out some of these things, maybe potentially going for gun stabilizer, but because of one amazing stat with the British heavy tanks, the accuracy being 0.27 without a vertical stabilizer, you pretty much don't need one. So that is kind of where I go with this tank. I'd rather have the bonuses in other areas, such as the ventilation. But if you did want even better accuracy, absolutely broken accuracy, you could swap out the vents and go for gun stabilizer. But for me, I never really found it useful, at least to the good degree where you're going to end up missing a ton, and the vents just give you much better view range, or at least a little bit better view range, a little bit better ammo or reloading speed. You're going to get better repair speed, you're going to get better kind of essentially in all different areas of the tank, the sorts of things that you can think of, and vents is a brilliant way to do that. But it's not a necessity. Anyway, of course, full premium consumables, you don't have to do this. You could swap out a large and a large med kit and repair kit out for a small. It really doesn't make a huge amount of difference. It's just whether or not you want to be the best or perform the best in this tank. You are going to need the premium consumables. If you can't afford 30,000 per game, then don't spend the 30,000, but definitely spend the 10,000 to pick up the enhanced rations. Otherwise you're a bot, because enhanced rations is literally the best piece of thing that you can put on your tank and cost you the least. So yeah, enhanced rations have on every single one of your tanks, regardless of whatever tank you're playing. Enhanced fire suppressor, this is the noob trap, the tank or the piece of equipment that you think that you'll need, but actually is completely pointless in my opinion, and is essentially a very situational thing. And I never ever run it on any of my tanks. And just to prove it to you guys, you can see if we look at tier 9 heavies, you will see that pretty much none of my tanks have fire extinguisher on them at all. And I would highly recommend that you guys do not use fire extinguisher either, and just run the kind of setup that we've got in the heavy tanks. It is the best one in my opinion. But of course, standard penetration of this tank is 259. It's amazing, very, very good for a heavy tank. And then the premium penetration is insane as well, and it's APCR, so the speed of this round is amazing. 1300 meters a second, very, very strong. 326 millimeters of penetration as well, making it amazing at range, and of course to be able to pen some of those heavily armored vehicles, things like Mausers, E100s, and of course the list goes on with heavily armored tanks in the game. And it basically makes you able to pen every single tank in the game if you aim properly, and RNG doesn't screw you over. But because your accuracy is so good, RNG very rarely screws you over. So yeah, a brilliant tank in general, with amazing view range as well, going up to 500 meters in the way that we've got it set up. For those of you wondering, commander skills, this is what I've got on my Conqueror. Is it the most optimal setup? No, because I haven't actually specifically respec my crew for the Conqueror. It's a very generic build that I use on pretty much all my tanks. And yeah, at the end of the day, your knowledge and experience of the game is far better than most of your skills, as long as you do put on some skills that are useful. But in terms of min-maxing the tank, probably dropping armor angling and going for something that actually boosts up the tank is a better option for most people. I think this was actually one of my ramming builds where we got controlled impact and armor angling. So yeah, be aware of that. Probably drop out both armor angling and controlled impact, and put in stuff like steady aim. And apparently we don't even have Born Leader in this tank, which is a complete bot play by me, so make sure you got Born Leader in there. But yeah, obviously going full ramming build apparently. But either way, that is the Conqueror's stats, that is the Conqueror. But I wanted to gloss over some of the tech tree lines, since you'll be playing through some of these as well. They are not the fastest. I'm going to give a generic overview here. You've got the Black Prince, the Churchills, etc. from the Matilda and the Medium 3. Obviously the lower tiers you're going to play only a couple of games in, because you'll get the next tank pretty quickly. But it's where you get to the Churchill 7 where you start to learn angling, which is basically not what you want to do as you get further in the tech tree line, which is always a good thing to note. But it is a good experience to learn angling and how to use it properly for when you do come into the German heavies and some of the other vehicles in the game. So a nice little starter to angling, and they work very, very well. The armor on the side of the Black Prince and Churchill 7 pretty strong, and of course the Churchill 1 as well. So yeah, with those they're pretty good, but there are a few weak points with side angling in the Black Prince, that sort of thing. There are some weird angles, but I won't get into it in this video. But yeah, the Black Prince very, very strong as well, but it does get low alpha damage, and that is the case with a lot of the British heavies until you get into the higher tiers. So you got 200 penetration with 150 damage on the top gun of the Black Prince. But what this will teach you is how to aim properly and use accuracy, and making sure you track and retrack opponents that you'll use as you get towards the Conqueror and Super Conqueror, the Chieftain and the FE215B, because essentially the British heavies are amazing at tracking, retracking, and essentially ruining people's days, because you have the reload speed over a lot of the other heavy tanks who maybe have higher alpha, or maybe they have a variety of different stats that mean that they don't get the reload that you do as a Conqueror and Super Conqueror. So yeah, Conqueror, very, very powerful vehicle, uses its damage and its damage per minute to great effect, and really rinses opponents. Probably the strongest tier 9 in the game for beginner players. And yeah, maybe even more experienced players will find this to be probably one of the strongest as well. It definitely is one of the strongest, but it's probably the strongest for new players, and one of the strongest, probably like top 3 strongest tier 9 heavy tanks in the game, and probably one of the strongest heavy tanks in general, tier for tier in the game as well. So the Conqueror, an excellent choice of a vehicle that you guys can play. And if you want to find out more, then we have got videos on the Super Conqueror as well, and we'll do a full tech tree line review at some point later on down the line. So with that being said, we've talked enough about the Conqueror and the tech tree line. Now it's time to look at the gameplay. Now then, cracking into the actual game, we have one that I've selected as part of the 2 kind of part gameplay that I want to showcase today in the Conqueror. And I've selected this game because it pretty much sums up the Conqueror, what it's good at. And of course, what's better map to actually do that on one of the most hilly maps in the game that really does end up with a lot of heavy tanks fighting. It is the kind of pinnacle map for if you want to go hold down in a hold down tank, the Westfield map. Of course, you want to go up the hill. Do not ever go right in your heavy tanks. It is literally a bot play. And by bot play, I mean like it's just not a good play whatsoever. For those of you wondering, yeah, please do not go right in your heavy tanks. It is a waste of an opportunity on this map. Now, there are some situations where maybe you're forced to go over there later on in the game, but definitely don't go there at the beginning. That is a medium tank, tank destroyer, and light tank area of the map. It really is not useful for slower heavy tanks. And by the time you get over there and make your way to that sort of position, you're probably going to lose a lot of health, and the game is going to be basically over. And in a hold down tank like this, there is a lot better opportunities to use your turret on this side of the map. So I thought I'd give you a brief overview there, as we're just trying to kind of enhance everyone's knowledge and hopefully find it useful. Some of it you might already know, and that's great, it's amazing. But yeah, hopefully it will kind of give some people an idea as to what to do and what not to do, given the experience that I've had in the game and me doing all of the wrong things. So yeah, don't repeat what I've done, and hopefully you'll be better than me in a much shorter period of time. With that being said, you can see here we are just going for a speculative shot. I'm not expecting to hit, but of course there's no one else for me to hit here right now. And essentially what I'm trying to do is essentially get a couple of free hits at the beginning of the game. We don't want to expose ourselves too much. You can see me going on the left hand side of the ridge, making sure to avoid me being exposed to other people. We can kind of push over here. We've seen that there's not really a lot of people over this sort of area. You don't really want to sit here for an extended period of time, but we're pretty safe here. We would have thought we got hit at this point if there was anyone camping in C6 and 7 or B6 and 7. That's kind of where people will camp. But what we can do now is use the turret as it's intended, which is essentially getting into a location like this. And we want to keep an eye on the people over to the right. And we get so close to being able to hit the WZ there, but it wasn't to be. And there you go, the little T28 prop trying to pen us in the turret. But as I said, the turret of the Conqueror, not an easy pen for anyone to hit, and certainly not an easy pen from this sort of distance. And you can see there, T28 prop backing down that hill, pretty scared, as I'm sure I would be as well if I was in a prop against the Conqueror hold down. But we picked up barely any damage at this moment in time, and a lot of the damage can come later on as you kind of clear out this flank. Now, there are people pushing up from behind me. It's fine at this point because we need to secure the middle, because if we don't secure the middle where this WZ is, we can get sausage sandwiched. And as I always say in the game, sausage sandwich, never fun when you're the sausage and not the sandwich. You want to make sure that you are not the meat that's being beaten against by the buns. Yeah, I don't know where I was going with that, but basically don't get encircled. You don't want that in the game. It's going to lead you to getting taken out real quick, and you can't use your armor in the way it's intended. We swapped to APCR here because we don't want to bounce any more rounds, as it's getting pretty close at this point. Not that we needed them against the prot anymore, because he's now been taken out. But yeah, from now on we've got premium rounds loaded. We want to make sure to remove these guys. So there is now a Jaeger who's behind, who we put one into. We've got to be very careful about the artillery because we've got our ass to him, and we definitely don't want to be getting penned in the backside. There you go. We luckily avoid an artillery round going into us, and we pick up the kind of tracking and damaging shot on the Jaeger there. But the little Cobra trying to get us in the backside, that could have been really catastrophic. We narrowly avoid the artillery here, and another one. For God's sake, leave me alone. And then the 114 comes over the ridge. Can we get the final shot on the Cobra? Because that could be a super dangerous tank. Yes, we can. And then it's just a case of dealing with this 114 SP2, who's not a problem to deal with. And he's gone with a bit of luck from RNG there to hit him over the ridge. The artillery then goes for me again, which is just artillery things. And we're down to 300 hit points. Not the greatest in terms of artillery in this game, just basically being pumped at the end, / middle of the game. And now it's just really going towards the last remaining couple of people. I'm a bit scared to push up. We don't know where those two TDs are. We knew that one of them had got spotted, but we don't know where exactly they are. Maybe they're in the middle of the map, we just don't know. We see that the artillery's over in the base, so let's try and get over there and hopefully we can get a shot into him, or maybe one or two of them, and then maybe we can find the TD. So you can see me coming all the way over to the left here. Now that is on purpose, because now we can remain out of the render range of people that might be camping over on the other side of the bridge. But with the artillery being taken out, we can push forward here. We're pretty safely that we're not going to get spotted, and in fact we end up finding the M5355 we would put one round into alongside the Tiger II, and there's 2 tank destroyers still somewhere lying about, and of course here the FE manages to hit the M53 just as we fire. Brilliant, nice to see. But we put one into the Tiger II, and at this point he's been pumped, so we need to keep moving if we want any more damage in this game. I'm going to go for a shot on the move. Notice that when I do go for a shot on the move, I don't turn the hull at the same time. This is because what you'll do then is engage worse dispersion. So essentially when you're moving the hull armor, you'll get bad dispersion, and because we're moving the hull armor, the turret will follow where the kind of hull armor is. So when you're moving the hull, it actually activates the turret rotation as well, because essentially you're moving both at the same time to a degree. To keep on the same target, and that is going to cause you to miss some of those shots on the move if you are auto aiming. So there's a tip if you are an auto aimer in some situations. Now most of the time you want to fully aim, and if we did on the Tiger II we would have finished him, but I wanted to keep moving so we can get towards the final 2 tanks in the game. Otherwise we'd be sat there for that 10 seconds longer. Maybe we miss out on a shot on the 114 at the end of the game, which obviously the Tiger was only on 70 health, and if we can get one onto the 114, that's 400. So even if we miss the shot on the Tiger because we auto aimed, we'll get more damage in the end anyway. And looks like we're about to get another shot onto the 114 SP2. We're going for the tracks, and of course, brilliant. Thank you, game. I really love it when you aim at the tracks to go and pen someone. And then I even more love it when you go to fire and the T95 is just that tiny bit too fast for you to hit him at the same time. But 4,200 damage is okay. It's nothing spectacular, and the Conqueror is capable of dealing 6, 7, 8,000 damage. We're up to 93% in the tank, given that we haven't played it in such a long time before the Marks of Excellence actually went live with the changes that they did have. So hopefully we'll be able to get the 4 marks at some point when I have a bit of time later on down the line. But with that being said, let's jump into the next one. And that next game is a very weird game on Fjords. Now, Fjords being one of the newly reintroduced maps into the game, introduced probably a couple months back. Maybe about a month or 6 weeks or something like that. It was released back into the game, probably longer than that to be honest, as my memory is completely shot. But either way, it was recently reintroduced into the game, and it's a brilliant map to actually try. Obviously you don't want to be trying to ram into rocks and stuff, because often a tank can't beat a rock, but at the same time, you can always try, and apparently I like to do that in this game. But the Conqueror in this sort of matchup, we are a top tier tank, so we're not really going to have any problems in this game. And with the amount of experience in this game that I have had, where I've played way too much of it, we should probably be able to deal with what we need to in this game, provided we don't do anything stupid, which is usually my downfall. Doing stupid things, thinking that other people will want to do stupid things with me. Yeah, stupid is as stupid does, and ends up back in the garage much more often than probably would have hoped. But the Centurion 7/1, pretty dangerous tank if it does load its Hesh rounds, and it can pen me in the hull armor, so we don't want to expose ourselves, and we certainly don't want to sit there against it if it's hulled down, as it's not a guaranteed pen in the turret, even with premium rounds. Albeit most of the time you will just pen it straight through the front of the turret if it is hulled down anyway. With premium rounds, but you never know, maybe you bounce and it pens you for 480, so I'd rather just avoid that entirely. And we can push up towards the rest of the tanks now. We can get up to this rock, there's no one in the middle, our medium tank has moved up there, so it puts us in a pretty safe spot. Go for a shot on the side of the WZ, and of course it bounces. Maybe we'll get some revenge in a little bit. E75 is pushing up to the northeastern side of the map, and we're just waiting for a shot. Maybe he'll expose himself, hopefully he will. And he does. Brilliant. Lovely. Nice to see that one. APCR coming in clutch because it's faster, and we may have missed with AP. And now we've got the side of the WZ, who's just decided that he's going to throw himself away by going through the middle of the map against 3-4 vehicles that can all hit him at the same time. Not a good idea. Either way, we're up to 1,000 damage now, and we got a little Waffle Panzer IV who's thinking he's funny at the back. But unfortunately for him, we can aim, and he goes back to the garage as well. But now comes the fun part. When you're a tier 9 heavy that is very, very strong in the first place, when you have 2 enemies in front of you, one of them being on a one-shot, yeah, it's not a problem. And we put one into the Centurion 7/1, that's fine. Don't bother with the light tank because he's just a little pest. He's not going to really do anything to me. We're going to ram the UDES for a bit of extra damage. We now lower his health enough so that we can one-shot him out of the game. And he's probably hating me right now as we're face-hugging him. And now we've got the Lynx 6x6, so we're going to fully aim by moving over to predict where he's going to come next. When you do have light tanks and mediums that try and out-traverse you, make sure that you do turn the hull and the turret at the same time. Make sure that you overextend yourself, because it's far easier to go back on yourself than it is to not have started moving early enough, because that's where people can circle you and it can end up with a circle of death. And of course you don't want that in the game. So we could have gone for the arty there, but we're going to finish off the actual tank just in case he does pump me for all of his shells if we miss or something. So yeah, we finish him off, and now we can go for the artillery piece. Hopefully we'll get him as well. But we're up to 5 enemies taken out in this game, and you can kind of see what it's like when you are top tier in this tank. Probably pretty OP, to be honest. And we could have got another shot into the T30 here. I angle a little bit, make it hard for him to hit us, and he actually hits our turret, which is brilliant. And now we can go after the WZ. Now, because we're in a Conqueror, essentially closing the distance to avoid him being able to hit our hull armor is the way to go. That tank has no gun depression, which means that it's going to be hard for him to hit the gun. I go up the slope, just try and avoid this artillery shot, but at the end of the day, he's probably not going to pen us, even if he hits us. And luckily, we finish him off, picking up the 7th enemy of the game, hopefully picking up an 8th in this game to get the Radley Walters medal if we can find the medium. Very rare that you get a 3,600 damage game with 7 enemies taken out, but I guess that is just the case of playing a tank with such a fast reload. But yeah, looks unlikely that we're going to pick up any more damage in this game. And pretty much that is the Conqueror experience. A very, very powerful, strong, brawling tank that can move forward. And it can also sit back and relax as well using ridge lines. And pretty much one of the best versatile vehicles in the game right now. And hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you want me to cover any more videos in a similar sort of manner where we look at all of the tanks in the tech tree and cover a variety of things about each tank, let me know in the comment section down below. Or do you just want me to show you 2 gameplays with commentary over it, talking about this stuff as we go through? Let me know in the comment section down below, and I will see you in the next one. Have a great rest of the day. Goodbye.